All right, so just a couple of little um, reminders. Okay, vocab quiz is on Monday. Okay, same format as always. 30 questions, 19 minutes. Okay, and then your Unit 6 exam is on Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday the 27th. And for those of you that like tests being a little bit shorter, you lucked out here because I made it late, and last night I just didn't really feel like doing 100 questions. I was just kind of done with it, so that's why it's at 75. 75 questions in 60 minutes. The study guide is posted. Okay, and the breakdown is I didn't count all of them, but I do know there are 30 questions on memory and then 11 questions on thinking. All right, and then all the rest is review, with Unit 4 being the heaviest of those. Okay, with like there are probably 10 questions from Unit 4 or something like that. All right, but so that's the breakdown there. And same thing as always, if you fill out the study guide, turn it in, that's worth an extra 2 points on your vocabulary. All right. Okay, so today and tomorrow, we're going to talk about thinking. This unit and next unit are sort of they're both unit. We kind of took one unit and split it into two because it's such a big unit, right? But this unit, which is memory and thinking, and then next unit, which is intelligence, testing, and language, all fall under what is called cognition. Okay, how we think, studying our thought processes, which include memory, thinking, problem solving, language, intelligence, all of these different things. So this part of this unit, I think, is pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. It's kind of just like a bunch of almost kind of standalone terms that you just kind of got to know basically what they mean and like an example of them. Okay, but it's not particularly hard. So, how do we think about the world? How do humans think about the world? Well, to make things as easy as possible on ourselves, right? As we know, humans like to categorize things, right? We like to say, all right, this fits into this fits into this fits into this. Okay, so for classification purposes, right, we form what are called concepts. Right, concepts are just broad ideas involving mental groupings of things that are similar to each other. Okay, I'm not going to spend much time talking about this because this is pretty straightforward. The idea of a concept in psychology is the same as the idea anywhere else. But these concepts are the exact same thing as schemas. It's just another way of saying schema. So, and just like with schemas, as we get older, our concepts get more complex, right? When you're young, your concept of a ball might just be one that is round, right? And then you learn that footballs are also balls, right? And rugby balls are also balls, right? And so then your concept of a ball it changes to be like, all right, they can be round or they can be oblong. Does everybody understand that? Yeah. All right. And then, we have different types of concepts. We have really broad concepts, and then we get more and more specific as we go along. Now, in forming these concepts, what we generally do is we create within each concept, we have what's called a prototype. Okay. A prototype is something that contains the essential elements of the concept. Basically, a prototype is like the mental image of like what you think of when you think of something. And it allows for us to more easily incorporate. Okay. Basically, just think of it as assimilation. If something's similar to our prototype, we assimilate it. If something's different than our prototype, then we might have to change our prototype a little bit. Well, like for instance, like for most of us, a prototypical bird is like a robin or an eagle or something like that. When we think of a bird, that's what we think of. Okay. You probably don't think of like a penguin or an ostrich or an emu. Are emus birds? Oh, okay. Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wasn't sure. Emu is really good to eat, but um, yeah, emu jerky is really good. Um, so kind of what we think of. So, for instance, if you think, and I think we've talked about this before, but if you think of like all of the teachers that you know at Ardrey Kell, who would be like who is like the prototypical teacher at Ardrey Kell? Like who's the most teachery teacher at Ardrey Kell? Right, Miss Pendleton. Okay, Miss Pendleton just had her baby 2 days ago. So just saying. All right, so yeah, I can see. All right, Kelly, Mr. Biddle. Is it Biddle or Biddell? Yeah, I don't really know Chris at all, so I'm not sure. But okay, Can anybody think of another like who would be like just the prototypical teacher? Like just like I think Coach Green is the prototypical teacher. I guess maybe just because I know Carter really well, I don't necessarily think of him as okay. Yeah, so the prototypical teacher is just like a teacher that is to be like, all right, the most basic version of a teacher. Who like what teachers at Ardrey Kell like don't fit into the prototype of like what you think of when you think of a teacher? All right, Engel, okay. All right, Edwards, yeah. Generally, you don't think of somebody who just runs around just screaming all the time. Dude gets on my nerves. All right, anybody else? All right, well, so, all right, me, okay, yeah. All right, so sometimes, like when something doesn't fit a prototype, we have a hard time classifying it into a concept, like a platypus. Okay, a platypus is a mammal, but it doesn't fit the normal mammal prototype. Like, I don't know what you think of as a mammal, like a gorilla, or maybe like a dolphin, or maybe not a dolphin. I don't know. But like platypuses are, they have like duck bills. Right, they're venomous. They lay eggs. Okay, and so we have a hard time like, but we have to understand it's a mammal, so then we have to kind of change. We have to accommodate our prototype. Right? Okay, so all right, so like I said, this is kind of a bunch of concepts that just kind of got to tie together. All right, so one of the things that goes into thinking and problem solving is creativity. Now, there is not really a there's not really a consensus on what is creativity. Um, because creativity is kind of in the eye of the beholder. But when we get to intelligence, we'll talk about creative intelligence, which is it absolutely is a type of intelligence, being creative. What psychologists kind of say is it's the ability to produce ideas that are both novel and valuable, meaning producing ideas that are new, but also have value to people. Like I can say, like, hey, let's make a new dessert, and it'll be caviar, dark chocolate, and almonds. And you'll be like, all right, well, that's a new novel idea, but it's not going to be valuable to anybody because it's going to be disgusting. All right. So for creativity, we basically have to say, like, all right, is this something that is a new idea? And is it something that other people are going to be able to? Now, they have found correlations between creativity and different types of thinking. One of the types of thinking that they say basically lacks creativity, or people that aren't creative think like this, is what's called convergent thinking. All right, we could call convergent thinking like thinking inside of the box, but it is basically means that like all of your thought processes, whenever you're trying to figure out a problem, your goal is to narrow down all solutions to one solution. Right? People who think like this tend to think much more kind of black and white. And unfortunately, this is the type of thinking that is, for the most part, promoted in school, right? Like multiple choice questions are convergent thinking. You're given 5 options and you got to narrow it down to the best possible option. Okay. And that's kind of the difference between like if you look at like advanced placement versus international baccalaureate, IB. AP is kind of promoting convergent thinking. There are essays and whatnot, but then IB is kind of promoting a more creative type of thinking. But with convergent thinking, we're just trying to narrow down. We could call this like people who maybe think like this are maybe more a little bit more like math oriented. Okay, not saying that mathematicians can't be creative, but with math, there is generally a right or wrong answer. Now, the type of thinking that they have associated more with creativity is what's called divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is the opposite of that. Okay, when you're trying to find a solution to a problem, your goal is not to narrow it down to one solution, but come up with multiple different solutions to a problem. We could call this like thinking outside of the box. Okay, they have associated this type of thinking with higher levels of creativity. Okay, those of you that excel in classes like this, where it is more abstract. This class is, even though we do multiple choice stuff, the way that we think about things in this class is more divergent thinking because there's never just one correct answer for anything. But you think about like coaches, right? I'm the women's lacrosse coach. Okay, and then we have a couple of children of coaches in here. Right, we've got the women's soccer coach child and the men's lacrosse coach's daughter in here, and I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. Okay, but like coaches, if a coach goes into a game saying this is the game plan, we are sticking with it no matter what happens. Right, that would be more convergent thinking. Coaches need to go into things with a looking for multiple different solutions to say, all right, if this happens, then we got to do this. If this happens, then we got to do this. Okay, that is more convergent thinking or divergent thinking. Um, One other thing going along with creativity that I just found interesting. Who in here is messy? Like not dirty, but like messy. Like you a lot of times just have like stuff laying around. Especially with like your workspace. Whose like workspace is messy? Okay. All right. Mine is relatively clean right now because I cleaned the shit out of my house on Monday. But usually like if you go to my desk at school is generally a wreck. Like I have stuff all over it. My classroom is usually a wreck. They have actually found that higher levels of messiness, especially in your workspace, are correlated with higher levels of creativity. And they've actually found that like people that are really neat but are forced to do work in a messy area tend to become more creative when there is the mess around them. They don't necessarily know why. It could just be because like creative thought is more chaotic. And so that kind of chaos creates more creative thought, but I thought it was interesting. All right. Are there any questions about any of that? All right. So let's talk about problem solving, strategies that we use, and then possible obstacles that can get in our way of good decision making. All right. One of the ways that we solve problems is through algorithms. All right. Most of y'all know what an algorithm is. You've learned about it in math class. All right. But we use algorithms all the time in our regular life. An algorithm is any sort of step-by-step procedure that guarantees you a solution as long as it is done correctly. If you do it correctly, you will get the right answer. Okay? You know, think about math. Like, all right, quadratic equation. As long as you put the right numbers into the right spots and then do the correct order of operations, you will get the right answer. Okay. Um, yeah, this is what computers use. Google uses an algorithm to find to find what you're looking for. Twitter uses an algorithm. Instagram uses an algorithm to see what posts should show up, what ads should show up on yours. Right? So they work, but there is a problem with them. For instance, let's say that you got a new lock and you can't remember what the locker combination is. If you were to use an algorithm to figure out what the locker combination was, what would you do? What would that process be like? A way that you're guaranteed to get the correct answer eventually. Try every single. All right, you start. You say, all right, okay, 000. Nope, that doesn't work. 001. Nope. 002. Nope. 003, and so on and so forth. Eventually, you're going to come to the right answer. You're going to get it, but it's time consuming. That's the problem with algorithms, is that they are time consuming. All right. So, what we use more often, a sort of mental shortcut that we use, what are called heuristics. A heuristic is a more efficient and speedier mental shortcut. We can call it a rule of thumb, where you know these are heuristics, whereas, algorithms are, you do this process, eventually you'll get the right answer. Heuristics are more like, all right, I think that this is what we should be doing. They are more so based off of prior experience. So they're based off of prior experience. A heuristic would be an example of what? Concept as the most important concept of the entire class. Yep, Prerna, that's correct. Okay, anybody else? Yeah, no. SAT, no. What are you talking about? SAT scores. Yeah, top-down processing. All right. These are based off of prior experience. All right, so they are top-down processing. So, if we okay, I see what you're saying. If we use the heuristic to figure out what the combo was, um, you you would like say like, all right, what are the most likely numbers that I chose? Like one of mine numbers would probably be 7, right? Because 7 was my number in lacrosse, and it was my dad's number, and my brother, and like my lucky number or whatnot. Okay. So like, it's just like, who in here, like for your passwords for stuff, all of your passwords are kind of just like slightly different versions of the same thing. Yeah. Okay. Most of us do that. All right. People who have like totally off the walls ones for everything, that's like crazy to me. All of mine are basically the same thing. All right. They are, maybe I'll capitalize some letter in one and not in another one, or put a question mark or an exclamation point in one. But, now the problem with these is that because they are based off of our own judgment and our own experience, they are more prone to errors than algorithms. For instance, like a company may automatically just throw away any resume that has a spelling error in it. Right? That'd be a good, and that makes sense. You're like, all right, if they can't bother to spell things correctly, then they probably shouldn't be, and they probably aren't that reliable. But it could just be that they like did it on accident, or maybe they're just so freaking creative that they can't even be bothered to spell things correctly. All right, so this is why like stereotypes are heuristics. Okay, where a lot of times there's truth in stereotypes, but not always. And you can tend to make bad judgments if you base everything off of a stereotype. All right, we'll get more into heuristics next class, where we talk about the different types. There are 2 different types of what are called problematic heuristics, which is where we sort of make the most mistakes. All right, anybody got any questions about heuristics? Okay. All right. Insight. We've talked about insight before, another way that we solve problems. Insight is just the aha moment. You're trying to figure out the solution to a problem, and sometimes when you're not even thinking about it, the answer comes to you like that. All right. Wolfgang Kohler is the guy that did research on this. His research that he did was with chimps, and where he did a couple different versions of this, but he hung bananas from the ceiling so the chimp couldn't get to it, and then kind of put in one of them he put boxes all around the room, and another one he gave him a bunch of different sized tubes that fit into one another, and eventually the chimps came to the conclusion that figured out that they could stack the boxes on top of one another, or they could put the tubes inside of one another, and to get the bananas down. So, but it took them a while, and they kind of just like found that like all of a sudden you'll see this. We got a quick video, but they would like stand on a box and be like, "Oh, huh," and it was that sort of slow realization. All right, so here is a little video. This is a pigeon with there's a banana hanging from the ceiling here, and the pigeon, which it can't fly, right? It's trying to figure out how to get the banana down. And you'll kind of see the process of insight here. There's no sound with it, so. All right, so you can kind of see in the video, like the pigeon stands on the box and then it gets down and it's kind of like for a second, it was kind of like, oh shit, might be able to use that. Okay, and then they come back to it, right? Because that's insight. A lot of times with insight, it's just trial and error, and eventually you try out different things, and then the solution kind of comes to you. All right, now, what are some of the things that when we are making decisions, okay, when we are making judgments, what are some of the things that can kind of cloud our decision making? One of them is what is called confirmation bias. Okay, probably a lot of you have heard of confirmation bias before. Confirmation bias is the idea that when we have a belief about something, a lot of times all we do is seek out information that confirms the belief that we already have. And we either ignore or discredit any information that goes against that belief. So, for instance, like, news networks, okay? This idea of like fake news is not really like, I mean, there is truth to it, but, news networks have kind of become the networks of confirmation bias. Unless you watch something that is very unbiased, like the BBC or something like that. Okay, but like if you are conservative, if you are Republican, all right, then chances are you watch more of either Fox News or Newsmax or OAN or Alex Jones, whatever he's on. All right. And then if you're liberal, if you're Democrat, chances are you watch more of MSNBC or CNN or whatnot. And a lot of times, these news networks, whether you're watching Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow, all right, they are giving you information that confirms what you already believe, and maybe not giving you information from the other perspective on it. Um, and and so we kind of only just seek out things that a lot of times this is because we're afraid of being wrong. And so rather than be wrong, right, rather than possibly be wrong, but look at things in a neutral scientific way, we just look at stuff that confirms what our belief is, whatever it is, and ignore other things. Things like, the whole thing that's been going on for the past 2 months to stop the steal. Okay, that this election was rigged and that it was stolen by the Democrats. 100% untrue. Okay, and there's a lot of evidence. Like they put up like cases in court 30 times, at least 30 times, and they all got shot down, saying this is nonsense. But people still believed that it was going on because they were being told by somebody like Donald Trump or Rudy Giuliani or Q, or whoever the hell Q is, that it was going on, and that confirmed what they believed. All right, and they ignored the evidence that no, it was not going on. Stereotypes. A lot of times, stereotypes are confirmation bias. When we have a stereotype and we see whatever person, like a group of people from that group that we have a stereotype on, what are the only things that we notice about that group of people? Anyone? Okay. All right. Well, let's say that you are. So there's a stereotype that Asians are bad drivers. Okay, it's not true, but there's a stereotype. Well, let's say that you believe that, and there's a Asian driver next to you, and they swerve into your lane and almost hit you, and you say to yourself, "Yep, they're bad drivers." That confirms it right there. But what if they swerved into your lane because somebody else swerved into their lane and they were just trying to avoid the other person, right? Chances are, if you fall into confirmation bias, you're going to look at the fact that they swerved into your lane, but ignore the fact that, well, they did that because somebody else almost hit them. So when we have stereotypes, a lot of times all we do is notice the things that confirm the stereotypes and ignore the things that go against the stereotype. Parlor, another good example is, anybody know what Parlor is or was or might be? I don't know. I don't know if it still exists. Yeah, yeah. Parlor was like Twitter for the far right, like QAnon conspiracy people. And when you get something like that, that is what we call an echo chamber, which is just where you are in there and everybody else has the same beliefs as you do. So you're just like bouncing the same beliefs off one another. And so you're not even getting any alternate perspective. All right, almost done. Well, do people just see that? Anybody pay attention? No. All right. All right. Fixation. Fixation is another thing that gets in the way of problem solving, which is where you are trying to solve a problem and you cannot see, you are so fixated on the way that you are trying to solve the problem that you cannot see it from any other perspective. Okay, that if you're trying to solve a math problem, right, and you keep using the same equation over and over and over, it doesn't work, and you just keep banging your head against the wall, all right, trying to do it. All right, that is fixation. Okay, because a lot of times we're just too stubborn and we think that our way must be the correct way. Now, for instance, All right, here's a little activity, a little example. If I gave you 6 matches and said, and I want you to draw this out, okay, 6 matches, they're all the same size, and you cannot break any of them. You just got to use the 6 matches. How would you arrange these 6 matches to form 4 equilateral triangles? No other shape can be involved in it. Just how would you arrange them to form 4 equilateral triangles? Okay, take a sec to see if you can figure it out. And if anybody did see, okay, all right, Avanti, no. That's 1 equilateral triangle. Okay, 6 matches, 4 equal, form them in to make 4 equilateral triangles. And if you think you got it, put it up to the camera. Okay, well, no, that doesn't work. I mean, fixation can come from confirmation bias, but fixation is just when you just don't have you just don't. No, Arian, that doesn't work because the cross pieces, they're all the same size. Okay? Fixation is just a problem-solving thing where you just can't see it from a different perspective. No, still that one wouldn't work because those aren't equilateral, and they're all the same size, so the hypotenuse would have to be longer. Confirmation bias, though, is when you only look for information that confirms a belief. Fixation is when you're trying to solve a problem but can't see it from a new perspective. Okay, can't snap them in half. Okay, anybody else think they've got it? Generally, after a couple of minutes, some people have insight and the answer comes to them. They have that aha moment. Okay. The TARV, nope, no, those are not equilateral, and the hypotenuses would have to be longer. Once I show you the answer, it will be obvious as a hindsight bias. No, you can't have only shapes that you can have. You can't Star of David doesn't work because you can only have 4 equilateral triangles. Nothing else. Yes, the matches are the exact same size. Yeah, Mads, that's correct. I think at least that, yeah. From what I can tell, yeah, I think it is. All right. Anybody else think they got it? No. You want to see what the answer is? No, no, that doesn't work. No. Again, you can't have any other shapes other than, no, the square with the X does, think about it. All right. They're all the same size. And so the hypotenuses of the two sides would have to be longer. No, Avanti, that is not correct. You can only have 4 triangles. You can't have an octagon, you can't have a hexagon, you can't have a decagon, anything like that. See, that's the thing. Like none of you, like you all are so fixated on something that you're not even listening to my. Yes, Avanti, that's correct. There you go. See, it takes. All right, so here, yep, Isha, that's correct. All right, here you go. All right, you all are so fixated on it being 2D because you're looking at something 2D that you weren't able to think of it from a different perspective, which is 3D. Okay, this is a really famous example of this. All right, so that is, and then there's confirmation bias that goes into this. Am I breaking up? Yeah. Am I now? Okay. All right. There's confirmation bias that goes into this because a lot of you all keep going. Like some of you all showed me the same thing like 3 times in a row, and I said no, and then you just redrew it, and there's confirmation bias there. All right. So last thing. All right. One of the things that goes along with fixation, a type of fixation, is what's called a mental set. A mental set is when you've used a technique in the past that has been successful, and you continue to use that technique for new problems, even though it has stopped being successful. So if you think about, like, if you're given 5 math problems and they're all basically the same, but on the 5th one, you might have to use a slightly different equation and you just keep using the same one that worked in the past. That's a mental set. Okay. We tend to approach problems in ways that have been because it's a heuristic, right? It's a mental shortcut, but doesn't always work. Studying for AP Psych the same way that you study for civics might not work, but some of you keep on doing it and having it not work. I think World War I is a good example of this, where World War I, in the beginning of World War I, these armies, the French and the British and the German armies, were fighting in a style that was the same way they had fought in the 1800s. When the French come out at like whatever the first battle is, Battle of Amiens or something like that, the French come out and they are wearing bright blue uniforms and bright red hats with big feathers coming out of them. Now, in the 1800s, when you just lined up and everybody had muskets and whatnot, all right, that's fine. But now you got machine guns, you got planes, you got tanks, right? And these armies are lining up, and not only lining up, but like they're not camouflaged at all. And that's why you see in the first year of the war, like the casualties are just astronomical because they're trying to fight the war in the same way they had fought in the past, but it just doesn't work anymore. And eventually they changed, but when they went to trench warfare. But all right, so does anybody have any questions about any of that? All right. Okay, so for asynchronous, and I did give you something for asynchronous, mainly because I want to give you more grades. All right. For asynchronous, there is just a memory multiple choice review. It's 12 questions. Okay, and you have unlimited attempts to get them correct. All right, so by next class, you can take it as I will take your highest grade that you get, which should be a 12 out of 12 for everyone. All right. Anybody got any questions about any of that? Okay. All right, guys. So if you have any questions, feel free to stay on, but if not, you're free to go. And I will see you all on Monday. Don't forget about your vocab quiz. Goodbye, guys. Have a good weekend. Bye. Yep. Bye. Yep. See you. Bye.